Hello, my traumatized babies and mentally ill Barbies. Today we are going to talk about The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward. This is the first book that I have read by Catriona, and I don't think it's going to be the last. So it's been a long time since I've officially gotten through The Last House on Needless Street. And if you watched one of the hauls that I already have on the channel, you will know that my expectations for The Last House on Needless Street were supremely low. And that is because I knew what the big twist was with this book going in. As I was spoilered, I had an idea of what was going to be served to me, and I didn't think I was going to like it. If you have been spoilered on the big twist for this book, it doesn't really matter. If you're someone who has been avoiding this book because of the subject material, because of the twist, give it a chance. I'm going to tell you what the big twist is, so if you don't want to be spoilered, get the heck out of this video, because all of my reviews are spoiler reviews. If you want to be a virgin for The Last House on Needless Street, get out of here and then come back after you've read the book so you can tell me your opinions on what went on, because we might not agree. What is the big twist in The Last House on Needless Street, which, if you know anything about me, you will know that it is my least favorite horror and thriller twist pretty much of all time. The Last House on Needless Street avoided this, and I'm gonna say why. So the big twist is that the main character, pretty much everything that's going on with him is due to the fact that he struggles with DID, which is dissociative identity disorder. While I really dislike intensely and the person was mentally ill, they were mad, I tell you, mad, and that's what the haunting was about, was that they were mad. I hate that. I really hate it. I think it's ableist and gross usually, but I am going to go to bat for The Last House on Needless Street. The twist is not really a twist, and I could be saying that because I was spoilered, so I don't know if you might want to take my opinion with a grain of salt. The incorporation of dissociative identity disorder into the plot and into the characterization, I don't think was done in a gross, exploitative way. I think if you are going to write a book like that, revolving around those themes and those issues, this is the sort of book that is doing it in the most respectful, empathetic, and compassionate way possible. And why is that the case? Mostly because the book is really good. So why was The Last House on Needless Street an excellent book? The writing is really wonderful. It has a style without being overwrought, but yet it is very, very readable. It is a compelling read. The pacing is wonderful. I did not feel it was ever boring. The characterization, fantastic, beautiful. It all feels very real. And there is a character point of view in this story that is a devoutly Christian lesbian cat. And I know that sounds completely obnoxious. She's fantastic. She carried me a lot of the times through the book. So writing, good. Characterization, excellent. Pacing, great. And the twist is not gross. The ending is so worth it. So cathartic. It's the best thing that you could hope for with a story like this. And it doesn't feel cheap. It doesn't feel like it's just happy feel-good times and I'm just gonna make everything all better. No, everything's not all better, but it's exactly at least what I would have wanted for a character like this. I can't remember a time where a book actually made me ugly crying. sobbing, headache stuffed up straight through to the end. Oh my gosh, I was just like, what? No. Like, I was saying no, but really it was yes, yes, Ted, yes, Ted. And now that I've said all of that glowing, wonderful praise for this, let me get into my criticisms for the book. They're very, very strange criticisms. I've told you that the writing is excellent, the characterization is great, and the pacing is good. However, I struggled, I want to say, through more than half of this book. There were 2 points where I seriously considered DNFing the whole thing, and I could not tell you why. There is literally nothing going wrong here, but I am just dragging. And that was why I said that the cat perspective got me through, because I really was struggling. Regardless of how well the pacing is going, being within the victim's mind frame, I don't know if this is really out of line, but I'm just gonna say, for a story, it's a little bit less compelling. I think that might have been what it was, because whenever we got onto Ted's mom, or this other point of view character that was not a part of Ted's system, I was much more invested, and they are much more predatory characters, but they are driving things. They're very, very compelling to read about because they, like, you know, they have so much pathology and everything like that. And it's not so much that Ted does not have interesting things going on, it's just that they are helpless. And while I have a lot of empathy for that, I think it just made me mired in everything that was going on. I wanted to be out of his perspective. I don't know that I really enjoyed my time with Ted until we really got to the end. And I was so glad that I stuck with it. There are always going to be people who just feel it is not right for someone who is not from that community, who does not deal with that particular chronic and very, very extreme mental illness, that a person who's not dealing with it shouldn't write it, that it should be somebody with DID who writes a book like this, and that it's going to be exploitative and kind of icky no matter what. I can't really speak to that because I do not deal with DID. So I would be interested to hear from people who know people who have DID, loved ones, friends, maybe clients, or if you have DID yourself and you have read this book, or you have opinions about people writing with those who deal with DID, let me know about it. Let me know in the comments. I just shared my personal feelings that I felt if you're gonna go that far out of your lane, that this is probably the best you will be able to do it. What is my last big criticism? This book, this is by Tor Nightfire. I remember the marketing as being kind of like, this is a haunted house story, this is horror, this is spooky. And I think another big reason why I struggled through most of the book until we got to that big like slope down towards the end was because I was in the mood for The Ring, and I got something that was a bit more, and I'm just comparing the tone, not the story. I wanted The Ring, and what I got was more Silence of the Lambs, except much more internal, way less actiony. If I would have known that going in, I might have been a little less draggy through a large part of the book. And I also might have decided to read it at a point where I was feeling that sort of a story. And the last big thing, which is also more of a rebuttal for criticism that I saw about this book and about depictions of people with DID, even though Ted, spoiler, is completely vindicated at the end of this book, this is the happiest possible ending we could have for Ted. A criticism that I saw is that it is still a poor depiction of people with DID because for most of the book, You are thinking that he is a predator. From his perspective, the way he thinks about himself and the way he's thinking about others within their system is that he is a monster perpetrating crimes. And what I want to say about that is, while I do not struggle with DID, I do struggle with CPTSD. And if you don't know what that is, the C at the front of CPTSD stands for complex PTSD. And the way someone develops that is that they go through long-term, very, very extreme, chronic trauma. And I know that as someone who has dealt with that, has worked through a lot of it over more than a decade worth of therapy, I know that when you're dealing with that type of abuse in your life, which DID a lot of the time is developed through very, very extreme trauma and abuse, much, much, much more extreme than anything I would have dealt with, that the mentality that's created out of that is that you in fact are the one who is at fault. You are the monster. I know that I spent a great deal of time in therapy initially making excuses for the people who abused me. I was trying to convince my therapist about what a bad person I was. And that's why that this had happened to me, because part of the abuse, part of the neglect, part of the trauma is that typically the people who are doing that to you are also gaslighting you. They are making you feel like you deserve it, and you receive essentially horrible, like decades usually worth of brainwashing, convincing you that the only reason this is happening to you is because there is something fundamentally wrong with you. And if you never get treated for that or learn how to manage and heal to the best of your ability, that will stay with you. And let me tell you, just the amount that I went through and deal with, I can't even describe to you the amount of pain that I used to be in, and how long it took to come out of the mentality that it was in fact me who was at fault. So I actually think that what is being shown in the house on Needless Street is a very realistic depiction of someone who has gone through enough trauma to develop dissociative identity disorder. And that was why the ending of this book in particular, it was like being punched in the chest with every single one of my feelings. Because if you've ever dealt with that and you hear what someone finally tells Ted, it's like everything that you wish somebody would have told you. And it's essentially that, I'm sorry, and I see what has happened here, and we all should have seen sooner, and we should have done something. So I want to stick up for Ted's characterization here. The way he feels about himself is completely how someone in his situation would feel about himself or themselves. That's all my big points for The Last House on Needless Street. I would say if you are in the mood for a dark thriller, most definitely pick this up. It has a little bit of a slower pace than your standard thriller, but I recommend it. The writing is excellent, so if you are someone who is always looking to learn from other writers, this is a great book in which to do so. And I would say that if you have been, kind of like icking this book, not buying it, and not experiencing it because of what you have heard about the depictions of mental illness and dissociative identity disorder in the book, I would say, you know what? I think you might be surprised. You might be pleasantly surprised. I know I was, because I was ready to hate this book aggressively. I really was, and it turned me around. I was pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed my experience in retrospect, especially the ending. It will get you in the feelings, I promise you. Please go pick this up. And if you have read this, tell me about it in the comments or through your own video, whatever. I want to know what you thought. Do you think I'm wrong about anything? Do you still think like, no, like the depictions of mental illness in this book, no matter which way you try to spin it, using it in this context and still as a plot twist, it's not a good idea. It's offensive. Tell me if you think so. Tell me if you think I'm wrong about anything that I said, or if you actually think I missed some criticisms or some good parts that I should have shouted out. And tell me, who was your favorite character? Olivia was my favorite, and the mom, ooh, the mom was my favorite. And I also liked, I'm not gonna remember her name either, the woman who is after Ted, who you're kind of on her side in the beginning, right? I'm not going to give too much away about that one. If you read it, you know. If you haven't read it, you should go read it. But there is a woman who's after Ted. I was actually more interested in her twist than what was going on with Ted. I was just like, what? Like when her ending hit, I was like, like that was another emotional one. Do you think? I thought so. I was just like, the karma, karma that can like only happen in a novel, but I thought it was extremely appropriate and also so sad because she was someone who was so traumatized too, and we really get, I think, a really sophisticated look about how the things that we don't let ourselves feel and work through and forgive and whatever else we need to do to manage it, get over the bulk of it, even if we're revisiting those feelings and managing symptoms throughout the rest of our lives. If we don't do that big work, look at how the trauma drives us and impacts our lives. I thought that that was incredibly powerful through both plot lines. The woman who was after Ted and Ted themselves. So tell me about it. What did you think? Was it effective? Not effective? Who did you like? Who did you hate? Hated that therapist. Hated that therapist. All right, I'm really gonna go now. And I don't know, I'm gonna try to read faster.